And we are live talking about Kathleen Kennedy and the rumors that tell people she is leaving Star Wars. It's a very interesting thing to talk about and to react to. So, how are you, dear Lord?
I am good. It's a new month. February flew by leaps and bounds before I knew it. And I was, hopefully, as I said, some of my projects came to fruition.
Amazing. What about you, Mandalore? How are you today?
Well, I'm still a bit iffy since the last stream, but I'm not drinking anymore, so that's a good thing.
That's character growth there. Okay, so I guess we will dive deep into Caitlin Kennedy is Never Leaving. Um a video made by a content creator I enjoy a lot. And let's play this.
You guessed it, we're just not allowed to have any peace. Hi, my name is Sydney, welcome back to hell. And as per usual, before we launch in, today's video is sponsored by Surfshark. And this one's very funny, I worked very hard on it, and if you
Pause. Oh, whoa. How do I skip the ad?
so you can go and check
That's still the ad. Amazing react there.
from an outlet that
Okay, so now we really dived into it. Perfect.
I've never heard of, called Puck, wrote that Kathleen Kennedy informed Disney, as well as her friends and colleagues, that she was leaving the company at the end of the year. The writer
I feel like we always hear that about her. Am I right? The Lord.
It's more hope than anything else. But
So, the rumor that Doomcock is very famous for, and a bunch of others, is Kathleen Kennedy's always stepping down. Kathleen Kennedy's always. And 5 years, 6 years later, 10 years later, she's still there. So, she actually was. When Disney was acquired Star Wars, she was like pointed kind of the head of the studio or the group. She came from the Lucas. Mandalore can correct me if I'm wrong. Lucas Arts book club section. She kind did, and she was like, Lucas was basically done with Star Wars. Like, I'm not making another Star Wars, and then she's had the contract as the head producer and stuff since. So
I just want to say, I'm not sure where she came from. I know she's pretty much been working on Star Wars since, like, I think it, not the first movie, but the second or third one, I think. Like, there's pictures of her on set. I'm not sure what her actual what she's contributed to it other than destruction. But I know she's been with Star Wars since George Lucas, and she's been there for a long time. But that doesn't mean she's good, just means she's been there for a long time.
You always have in some places that employee that sucks, but they are around because they fill the place and because they got the dirt on someone else. That's all she feel like. She's the useless employee that knows something.
she was the middle management they really couldn't get rid of, and Lucas just appointed her, supposedly, or gave her the blessing.
Blessing or curse to Disney.
Fact.
Adds that this isn't that huge of a shock, given that Kennedy will be 72 in June, and she's been at Lucasfilm for over a decade. He further writes that his sources say Kennedy was planning to leave in 2024, but decided to stay on for an additional year. Of course, given how polarizing she is as a figure, many Star Wars fans associate her with the destruction of the franchise. You can imagine how much celebration
Guys are fun, and Mandalore, you can turn on your cam and showcase all of the cool stuff you got about it. Are you associating her to the destruction of?
There's two big parts to Star Wars destruction. It's big chunk is her because she has the final say on anything, and if she's worked with George Lucas, so she should be able to know what would be and what wouldn't be good. But also, it's partially the fake fans. And by say the fake fans, it's the people who are brought in for some reason because it's the cool thing, because it's the hipster thing at one point, or because there's a cute thing like Grogu brought in Baby Yoda / Grogu brought in a lot of fans. It was actually part of the reason that brought me back in, because it's like, oh, this Mandalorian story seems cool. And I came back into Star Wars after sort of like I watched the movies, but I wasn't a fan. It was just like, find out what the story is. I came in around the second season of Mandalore. But it's all these fake fans who bring in their own politics and say, we're the real fans, and bring in all this
hatred.
It's not even the hatred. They bring in all this garbage stuff. They like the LGBT who bring in all this, and they bring in all this fandom and headcanon about people being gay and all these romances, which like, it's not about romances. Like there's some romances in some stories, like, but it's just they're inserting themselves too much into it and saying, this is the fandom, this is how the whole story needs to be. And it's just been absolutely garbage.
So we can easily say parts of that destruction would be the creative and the people around Kathleen Kennedy as well. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay. D-Lord, before we move in, do you want to add something else on the destruction of...
So it's not that
power?
It's not that we oversee the destruction. She oversaw the destruction. She had it different. She literally came through the door with recent projects when she had the projects. I do not know if she over greenlit like Rebels or some of the... Like Rebels was really good. Like Rogue One was really good. But the idea of a lot of her works, one of the first major things that happened under her tenure was throwing out the Legends and the EU canon. Then turn around later saying, we do not know how to write or have stories.
This is a big brain move. You know, she's a good chess player there. So I guess we can play and see what else is to say.
Has taken place since this news dropped. Not to mention, other articles started speculating basically immediately who would take her place once she departed. Probably some sort of Kathleen Kennedy clone at this point. I'm kidding, of course. I feel like she would actually rather do this role until she dies, and at which time she would rather be cryogenically frozen and then kept at Disney headquarters until...
We see parallel with Trump and Cryo Trump.
Such time as she could be resurrected. This feels like the plot of a film. This is the plot of a film, isn't it? Anyway, for whatever reason, and I am sorry to be the bearer of bad tidings, this news appears to be inaccurate. That or the company is doing some serious butt covering and backtracking because she is in fact leaving. On February 27, Deadline published its own article titled Kathleen Kennedy Speaks on Her Lucasfilm Plans. She is not soon retiring, and the films that will keep her in the Star Wars orbit for years to come. The article outlines an interview conducted with Kennedy where she says that she is not retiring, but has instead been talking to Bob Iger, the current CEO of Disney, and Alan Bergman about who might eventually replace her.
It's funny, the moment you start saying that, people jump to conclusion. I think this is exactly what's going on. She started talking about it, so people spread rumors saying, oh, she's
not
leaving.
Necessarily rumors. People don't usually look for successors unless they're planning on leaving soon. It may not be as soon as people want, but just that's not a huge stretch to go, oh, someone's talking about their replacement now. They've been there for how long? That makes sense. Like, that's not a huge surprise to me, at least.
To me either. Like, at some point, she's old. Maybe she will die on that throne before retiring. I don't know. But, like, at her age, I think a lot of people think about the future and the legacy they want to leave. And I feel like she's not satisfied until she has a few success in a row, because obviously Mandalorian first season was a success, but that wasn't enough for her to retire. So my guess, she's greedy and she wants lots of trophies before going out. But if she can't, then she will be the one that shows that person that will get the trophies.
No, people usually don't just back out when they have one really big success after a couple crap ones. They keep going thinking, oh, I've done this, I can keep doing it, and then they just hurt after a while.
Yeah. Do you want to add something, D-Lord?
So the rumor that she was leaving LucasArts goes back a while when people were starting to hold her accountable for the failure series or the series that weren't turning out well. And the idea is, okay, she kept greenlighting projects or losing interest because she's at the age that you need to retire or you're just going to die in that position. So usually in either a tech firm or entertainment firm, as soon as you start hearing rumors about they're looking for openings, like at a game studio as an example, oh, they're looking for this person. They're either working on a game or they're restructuring. So we saw this with Star Wars where they're putting feelers out to potentially replace her. But obviously, if you look at the Kathleen Kennedy era, it's not all been failures. You're right. Book of Boba Fett had its bright moments. Early Mandalorian had it. Andor. But she had far more bombs than she had successes. Rebels, arguably, let's say, even if you turned over the reins too late to Filoni, she still had a hand in greenlighting projects. How long have we heard about Rogue Squadron, not Rebels, but all those weird projects that
We've
never
been hearing
manifested?
about it for years.
Yeah. And she could either, there's the thing is, she can go out on top or she can go out quietly on a low, like Bob Iger did before.
Well, as I was going to say, it's not even, and sort of what you sort of said, it's not even about that she's had some success and failures. It's which outweigh how are her losses compared to her successes. And holy
Her
crap,
legacy is not great, and I think she wants to fix that.
there's a few bright spots in her career. Like Mandalorian, all 3 seasons were pretty good to me, except season 3 had some where they dropped some where they could have done better. There was some things in the one episode that doesn't exist. Other than that, like some for TV shows, the only thing a TV show that's really been a huge failure has been Acolyte.
Everyone hates this shit.
But Rebels was good. Clone Wars, the final season, which came out under her, was loved. There's plenty of shows that have done very well under her and projects. The sequel trilogy was garbage, but it was still respected in a way. They were still new Star Wars content after how long? Like there's still people like I can still watch them and enjoy them, but they are the weakest of all the movies. But you watched the first one and it was a ripoff of A New Hope. Like they all were ripoffs of the previous 3. In their
That's
own
true. They both have snowy planet.
it's more than it goes a lot more, and there's a lot more than just that. But people still can watch them and enjoy. Some people can enjoy them, and there's still debates about how good a character about Rey and stuff. It's not just everyone going, "Holy crap, that was shit!" Like with some of the stuff. You talk about the episode that never happened in The Mandalorian, and everyone knows what you're talking about. You talk about the Acolyte, unless you're one of those people who just enjoy it because it was representative of you, I'll say it was garbage.
That's true. I don't know anyone that's like, oh, that's a good show, and that
most of her stuff have some positives, but it's just the negatives are so fucking negative that it pulls everything else down.
That's true. I fully agree.
She said, "We have an amazing bench of people here, and we have every intention of making an announcement months or a year down the road." Really holding on to this position for dear life, aren't you, Kathy? Kennedy goes on to add that any mentions of her retiring are purely gossip, both now and in the past, and even when she does eventually step aside, she will be around for years to come to assist the person who takes her place. Now, who really knows if Kathleen Kennedy actually plans to retire by the end of the year, or if she's actually even found a successor of sorts? I guess
It's not by the end of the year for sure. I don't think so.
the trouble with corporate decisions is they really do encompass all sorts of people and all sorts of angles. But what we do know is that she is never going to leave. Because one thing that I do think is very true in what I just told you is that she will stay around once she's found her successor. It's kind of like when you break up with somebody except they still live in your house and you can't get them to leave or stop taking the ice cream from the fridge. I guess in this case, Star Wars is the ice cream, but I'm not quite certain what the fridge is. I haven't fully thought out this analogy. Would the fridge be the fans? The successor? Who is the fridge? The other thing is that Kathleen Kennedy said in this article that she will never stop making movies and she will die making movies.
And what's best to make movies when you're head of Star Wars machine or something? Any thoughts on anything that's been said since the last time we paused?
So the idea, right, is she is touching on a point. If they have been searching for a successor to replace her, here's the thing. They've been searching, like Disney's gone through leadership changes, like Bob Iger came back and some other people. They've done it. The thing is, at some point, Disney had to go to her and say, "You're bleeding money," and have her held her account. We do not know how much. A lot of the people in like Doomcock and them are saying they're all that she was. Most of us who said that, when we said that, we all saw the Business Insider reports. They weren't happy with the way Lucasfilms was running. She was going to oversee. They go, "We're going to relaunch Indiana Jones with Phoebe Waller-Bridge." Everyone just looked at her and goes, "This looks bad. This was her pet projects." And this is all, you can look at Lucasfilms, right, and see this. Like, the idea is she probably won't leave till she has a hand-picked successor or they forced her out. But they don't have a replacement.
And they will not force her out because that would look bad for that company that really screams, "Oh, diversity, let's be diverse." Like, it doesn't look good if you fire your woman there.
No, they can, as long as they find a woman who they can find to do the job. They're kind of stuck with finding another woman, but as long as they find another woman, they should be safe.
Fact. Any other thoughts outside of I paused at really a glorious moment for Sydney? One eye closed. Anything else to add?
She doesn't really she comes up with ideas, but I don't think she's making the movie. She's making the material because she just sort of says, "Yes, this is a project going to be done." But other than that, she doesn't put much into it. Kevin Feige is and people don't like the two of them.
And that's surprising for Feige because, let's be honest, he did a lot of good things before.
No, he does. But Kevin Feige and what's the other name, D-Lord?
He knows the lore.
On who? Which company?
No, but Kevin Feige and who's the other one that are pretty much Star Wars? What's his name?
Dave Filoni?
Favreau?
Yeah.
Favreau?
Yeah, those guys.
Maybe I mixed up names.
People love them, but people, especially people who love the original trilogy and see everything else as garbage, hate them. And they hate that people like them. It's hard to say what's going to happen, but those are the guys who are doing most of the work. Those are the ones who are writing. Those are the ones who are are making people want to stay and watch.
Yeah.
Because the
Agreed.
original Mandalorian show, which was greenlit by her, wasn't actually The Mandalorian. The Mandalorian was originally supposed to be Boba Fett, a show about him.
That's interesting.
But they couldn't actually figure out how to write a show about him, so they went with The Mandalorian. Like, so many projects have been come up and tossed or reworked because they can't. Lando, which I never had any interest in, was, I think, officially canceled. But
At last, they put that dog out of its misery.
I just didn't like what's his name is Lando. Obi-Wan Kenobi, the Kenobi show was supposed to be a movie.
That would have worked better, actually, but they want some subscribers on their service.
Andor was supposed to be multiple seasons. I don't even think they had how many, but there was enough people, and I was one of them, who said, we know how the story ends. Like, you can't do that much TV show. And then they dropped it down to 5 or 4, and then they dropped it down to 3, and now they dropped it down to 2. Like, this is the final season. And if you look at the episode schedule, they usually do the series premiere, season premiere, and the series finale as 2 episodes. They'll usually stream them. Sometimes they'll do one to stretch it out if they can stretch out the views. Andor every week is 2 episodes.
Wow, that's surprising.
Because they know it, and it looks good. Like, I didn't have high hopes for Andor. It still looks good. I'm still glad it's only 2 seasons. But it's not. It's one of the weakest areas. Like Rogue One. I know people love Rogue One, but it's one of the weakest standalone decent properties. Like,
that's true. I agree.
So I'll say on this, like, you talk about Disney Plus. Half her shows, right? We've seen it over the years. I think I've showed this to you guys before. I've showed it on my own streams. All the canceled projects like Bounty Hunters, these were all done to prop up Disney Plus. Disney Plus was Disney's main outlet for both Marvel, Star Wars shows as their streaming services. Even if they bled money, half the shows she tried to produce or greenlit was for that. Like, she also had like something else, Star Wars Visions. Star Wars Visions was really good as well.
Oh.
Okay, maybe we'll disagree on that, Mandalore. But the idea is Andor and other shows, the good shows that she produced were outshined by the bad shows. But at the same time, right, it's like the idea where it's a combination. She is the executive producer. She does make the call. She did make the call to bring in Lindsay Headland on Acolyte. She approved the budget for Acolyte. So you have to understand, she does have a role. And I've heard people defend Kenobi. I literally heard a person I game with, he literally said, Acolyte's good because it showed Yoda and Darth Plagueis. I'm like, there's your jingling keys.
Oh, God. I will bring this up again. I will bring this up again. Yoda, which was a simple thing they could have done. They screwed up the Yoda scene.
That's funny. When people are like, oh, it's good because cameos, I cannot take them seriously.
Well, no. I understand the Plagueis because someone who's been talked about, you never see anyone past Sidious. It's nice to see previous Sith. But the way they brought him in and the way that they sort of did the story with the stranger was horrendous, and it goes against lore about the rule of 2 and the secrecy. Him announcing he was a Sith broke lore.
Yeah.
Because the whole thing was about the secrecy and the rule of 2 and just you don't go out admitting. And it was just
Terrible. There's no other word.
no, there was nothing redeeming about that except it showed how bad wokeism was. And because of how bad the Acolyte did, they had to rewrite what was that Disney movie? Inside Out, the one about the emotions.
Oh yeah.
They apparently had a gay subplot between the character Riley and a friend. I haven't seen the second one. I've only seen the first one. They removed it because of how bad.
That's a good thing they removed it. It had no place in the story.
And that was after how bad Acolyte did, that they're seeing that, holy crap, people really don't like this gay bullshit.
Yeah. But I also think it's because it just didn't fit Inside Out, because I did see Inside Out.
They don't care. They've never cared about fitting. They want it. They don't care if it has nothing to do with the plot. They like to throw in gay people. They actually did it right in what's it called? Skeleton Crew, where the mothers. There was two mothers. But they didn't point it out like, oh my god, she has two gay mothers. That's why she's like this is. It was just the character had two gay mothers, and it was briefly like there was no touching upon it other than there was two gay characters.
I didn't notice it. We needed that stream to talk about it for me to realize it.
But yeah, exactly. That's the point. Like, and that's how it always was. Like, there used to always be shows that had those stories, but the episode involved a proper lesson. It wasn't just shoving it in your face like everything else has done.
Yeah. So I guess now we can move along that video.
Don't threaten us with a good time, lady. But more than these two things, even if she did remove herself from the company, I'm not even sure that matters at this point, given how much damage she's done to the brand. Kathleen Kennedy's legacy is stained into the fabric of what Lucasfilm and Star Wars are at this point. But you want to know what shouldn't be stained into the fabric of the internet? Bad people.
You sound like an ad.
People who
I think it's an ad.
We'll give her a chance
to identity and
that's an
ad. Surfshark.
I just have to say, I've lost respect for her after she started working
to live in the way that you created them, and that the universe of Star Wars continues to grow. I want to preserve within the spirit of this company, and as it moves into Disney, I think it's vitally important to anything we create that we hold on to the spirit of what started all of this.
Oh yeah, we can absolutely see how well this worked out 13 years later. This might sound somewhat dramatic.
That look on George Lucas's face as he's being woman-splained about the lore he created was his soul leaving the body.
Well, yeah. Like, even though he actually wasn't a huge fan of most of the Legends stories, like the books and all that, like, he was kind of like, he really wasn't a fan of it or didn't like most of it. That was still part of his, and it still continued on his story. It didn't rewrite his stuff. It added on. She just completely threw everything out and went, because if you remember when the Last Jedi came out, Mark Hamill, his last moment before he was infected by brain rot, was saying, that's not my Luke Skywalker. That's not my character. And he called out against it. Then he went quiet for a little bit and started going, yeah, that's mine. Disney had a word with him and infected him with the brain bacteria. And now he's gone for
give a pile of money. People will shut up and just do
well, he's always been a prostitute for money. He'll do anything for money, but he at least had some common sense back then, and he said right after that wasn't his. And then shortly after that, he went quiet for a bit, and now he's all blah blah blah. I'm retarded. Blah blah blah. I drool into a cup. Blah blah blah. Donald Trump's penis.
And to close off that segment before we play, I really feel like she destroyed and damaged the brand a lot, and I don't think I'm the only one thinking that. Like, nobody watched Skeleton Crew, and if we had more success than just the Mandalorian first two seasons,
Ahsoka was actually pretty good. I'm actually really can't wait till the second season of Ahsoka.
Same here, but it wasn't good enough for people to be hopeful about Star Wars.
In all
What's
honesty,
really well received was really Mandalorian season 1 and 2, and a bit Andor, but even there, nobody has seen Andor,
No.
so
the
very
sequel
niche.
trilogy brought Star Wars back from a long hiatus of no Star Wars content, other than the cartoons. Mandalorian is what actually brought back fandom. Mandalorian is what brought back, because the last show that they did was that show that was set place between the original trilogy and The Force Awakens, where there were a bunch of pilots. It was it was one of that really crappy 3D styles. I watched it. Like, there were some good parts and stuff, but it wasn't great. It wasn't a great show. It was more just taking in Star Wars content. But no, and people, everything is like, but and for you, because I completely lost where I was going track with that, because my mind is fucking garbage. You would appreciate Ahsoka more if you watched the Clone Wars and Rebels.
Yeah,
because
probably.
A lot of that is a continuation of just the end of Ahsoka season 1 was a continuation or sort of a adding on to a Clone Wars storyline, and Ahsoka's Rebels sequel, and Rebels was a sequel to Clone Wars. So I think you need to watch Clone Wars before Ahsoka season 2. And if you want to do reviews about that, I'm pretty sure D-Lord would enjoy doing reviews on Clone Wars, doing one season at a time.
That could be fun. But I have other stuff, but I have that in mind for sure. Are we adding anything else on the brand has been damaged?
We can move along.
Okay.
But Kennedy isn't just a person in all of this. She represents a vibe shift at the company. She was left with a series of Lucas's works from which to build, and instead deliberately turfed them and instead pursued her pro-corporate feminism, pro-diversity spin.
What's that? This puzzle. Is he or they?
Oh,
the more I hear this,
arguably
the more
gayest Star
painful
Wars,
it
I think, by a considerable margin.
I think that Star Wars is so gay already.
Okay.
I mean, have you seen the fits?
And then they
We'd be
denied
like,
they
"Look
ever
how
said
gay
that."
this is," and then
Okay,
change
this
the
is the
reference.
interview when they were talking
That's
about
my
the
case. That's
Acolyte
C-3PO.
is going to be the gayest series ever.
Wait,
I
And the
have watched
Acolyte.
this
Pause on a second. This is when they said, Mandalore, do you guys remember in the interviews leading up to
The show, yeah, that was before the show even
they were
came
like, this is going to be the gayest Star Wars ever. And it's done by Lindsay Headland. And it turned out there was a theory. This is going to be a psych bill or explaining a psych therapy session because she had issues with her sister.
It was also, there was a lot of prediction that the show was going to fail just off that interview. Because I don't remember anything about the psych stuff, but I remember them talking about how, like, what they just showed, like how gay it was, and it was the gayest thing, which they then denied. And people said, if you have any problems with that, don't watch it. Just like Charlie's Angels, the reboot, and all these other shows that say this isn't for straight white men, and then they complain straight white men didn't give it a chance or they hated it, and they never said it was the gayest thing possible. You're muted. And Dealer, were you going to add more?
I'm with you, man.
I did mute myself. I passed the mic to you guys.
No. But I wasn't sure if you had more to say.
I gotta say, I agree with you, man. Like, people blame others because they don't want to take accountability on what they did.
The fact that they even denied that they even said it was gay at all. Like, they literally came out when people said this is gay propaganda, and people were like, well, no, it's not. We never said it was gay in the first place.
Stop lying.
And then what's her name? The main actress, which is, I calling her an actress is a stretch because she doesn't do much really good acting. Did that whole twerking video bullshit as a response to the haters.
And I will add this: I feel like the interviews about anything Disney since Kathleen Kennedy were terrible. It's more about buzzwords and let's get people attention. Let's be woke. Let's be proud. Let's just attract that crowd.
I don't think all are. The sequel trilogy was because of Rey was the lead and female lead, and you just don't like Rey because she's a strong female protagonist, despite ignoring Leia. It's only been a couple of the projects have had that, but even Ahsoka wasn't that sort of woken buzzwords. Ahsoka was more Rebel Season 2.
Even Padme was cool, and she was in the prequel, and the prequel were not really highly regarded, but they were like, oh, Padme was cool.
Yeah, but they didn't push that she was a strong, independent female.
In the 2000, it wasn't a thing. It became a thing in 2015 and above.
Also, she kind of died of a broken heart and got choked out, so you can't say too much about her.
Yeah. I guess that closes off the bad interviews. Let's just hear more about Sydney's opinion on that.
More times than I care to admit, and it still annoys the crap out of me. I don't know who finds this funny, but I want the kind of lobotomy they have. I yearn to have not a single thought that can pass between the two hemispheres of my brain. This is a spin that hasn't broadly resonated with audiences, given it seems that Star Wars is at one of the lowest points in its history. Lucasfilm has not produced an actual Star Wars movie since 2019. The films they have produced have been an exercise in disappointment and financial setbacks. Kathleen Kennedy greenlit The Force Awakens, a movie that performed fairly well to begin with, but was ultimately hit with major criticisms around its boring characters and lazy writing. Plenty of people argued that The Force Awakens was just a copy, really, of the first Star Wars film, and it relied way too much on nostalgia. It resurrected the original trilogy's beloved main characters, ripping them from their state of happily ever after, so to speak, where we left them when their stories ended. But it also tried to give us a series of new protagonists, but they aren't nearly as memorable as those who came before. One of the characters being Rey, the film's protagonist, and someone a lot of fans have grown to really dislike. Namely, because she's been accused of lacking a meaningful character arc and was given the Mary Sue treatment. Right out of the gate, she was skilled with minimal mentoring or training, which is a massive contrast to what we saw with characters in the earlier films. This is especially sad too when you realize that Kathleen Kennedy was working alongside George Lucas and a screenwriter called Michael Arndt on a new series of film outlines before George Lucas departed the company. Once Lucas was gone, she pushed Arndt out, and along with him, all of Lucas's ideas. And depressingly, this appeared to be a bit of a theme going.
I gotta say, when you push down, push off, whatever you call it, when you just tell people, yeah, I don't need you anymore, you should be having great ideas to justify pushing people out. And I feel like she failed on that aspect. Again, we will repeat what has been said already, but I think Andor was kind of well received, but nobody has seen it. Mandalorian season 1 and 2 were very good, but are these 3 projects enough to justify pushing out people? I don't know. I don't think so. Any thought on that, Mandalore or D-Lord?
I want to say, on the whole thing, on the Rey movie has been hinted at more often than not. It's going on its 4th director now. Mando, I don't know if you heard about it. I heard about it. They just announced another script rewrite, another director.
Well, I don't even think they have a script yet. I think they're still
working.
And
it's another director taking over the project. Mm-hmm. And that was supposed to be the successor series movie.
I honestly am one of the few who actually don't mind Rey. I actually enjoy Rey. But I think, especially, she showed, as she even said, she didn't really get a chance to be a character until the 3rd movie, where she actually showed some character development and sort of. I think she was written poorly, but she's a good character. She just needs to be better written. She very much was treated as a Mary Sue due to the whole kind of, she just was able to do stuff with very little sort of training and whatnot. And she just ranked up really a little too quickly with cheat codes. And yeah, the original Star Wars movie sequel trilogy was written a lot better. Darth Maul was supposed to be in it. I think Darth Talon was apparently going to be. There's chances of her being in that. But it was supposed to be, and Luke was still going to die, but he was going to die in a much better way, like in a heroic thing. It wasn't the same garbage as in what we got.
We cannot have male hero under Kathleen Kennedy. They
It
all
wasn't
need
even
to
that there was
die
a male hero.
horrible death.
It wasn't even male hero. Maul was still going to be the big bad, like, and I think it was not even Darth Plagueis was going to be the final bad guy in the end. I think it was Darth Plagueis's master himself was going to be. They've also dropped the ball on games. What was that last game that came out? Outlaws was garbage. And there's been a really good game that I really would. What was the one good game that they were supposed to do? It was 414. It was a young Boba Fett game in between the movies where he was growing up. There was also the Battle of the Sith, which was going to be a Darth Maul-led game, which was going to be really good. But they keep dropping the balls.
And yeah, I'm with you. Do you want to add anything else? I was kind of distracted a moment there. I guess not.
Forward. In a statement in 2012, Lucas said, "I have story treatments of 7, 8, and 9. By the way, story treatments are basically outlines, more or less. Anyway, and a bunch of other movies, and obviously we have hundreds of books and comics and everything you could possibly imagine. So I sort of moved that treasure trove of stories and various things to Kathy, and I have complete confidence that she's going to take them and make great movies." But Lucas himself learned the hard way that what he left behind wasn't used and didn't particularly matter to anybody. Shortly after The Force Awakens was released, he spoke to Charlie Rose, saying that even if he wanted to be involved at Lucasfilm still, the people in charge didn't want his ideas and didn't want him there.
They decided they didn't want to use those stories. They decided they were going to go do their own thing, and so I decided, fine. But basically, I'm not going to try to... They weren't that keen to have me involved.
Why am I not surprised? Is any of you surprised about that statement there? Mandalorian, you're not?
No, because a lot of feminists really hated him. They saw him as... A lot of people still comment how perverted he was, that when he said there was no bras in space. And Carrie Fisher, you can see nip. Or how she drew, what's her name? Ahsoka. They said she was very sexualized for a child. I was like, no, she wasn't.
I haven't seen enough of the Clone Wars to know anything about that. But hi, Charles. Any thought on the statement you just add in case you didn't miss it?
I'm catching up from behind, so go right ahead and I'll plug in the gaps in the meantime.
Perfect.
Okay, so let me say this on this thing. There's another interview. There's another part. I want to say this is from the interview later, where Lucas was asked, because there was a point where some of the news stories weren't taking off, and then they went back and they asked George Lucas to come back and help do some stuff, but they wouldn't take it. Which, this may come from that interview where he was talked about it. Because he was asked when he sold, because by the time he sold Star Wars to Disney, he wanted it to go somewhere. He knows he has an IP. He knows he's not going to do another trilogy. So he passed it off, hoping that they would carry it on. But as we've established early on, he always did not like all of the Legends novels or the extended universe. But he did recognize the good stories. Heir to the Empire. Literally, one of the new trilogies announced is Heir to the Empire.
Oh yeah, that's
The
the continuation.
Thrawn trilogy is going to be made. It's one of the best trilogy books, and that's the one. Correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't that where the Sun Crusher comes from?
I don't remember about the Sun Crusher, but that's the World Destroyer.
The Sun. It's one of them, but
there was a bunch of weapons brought out during that, and it's also can't be replicated without Mara Jade, without all these other characters that you can't bring in anymore.
How much input did George Lucas put into those books and trilogies and such?
He let the extended universe breathe. Timothy Zahn, he did praise it once.
Okay, so he wasn't overhand or anything. He just liked what they did. So
Yes.
That's kind of what you're saying. So This is coming from the same man who actually liked The Last Jedi. So how much are we putting weight into his opinion?
To be fair, he wasn't.
Was he drunk when he said?
Well, it depends on how he said it, right? Does he?
He shit on it publicly?
So he shit on everything after he sold it, but he actually said that he liked the change of pace that Last Jedi went in.
So, okay, here's the problem with a lot of the Star Wars projects under Kathleen Kennedy. This is where, when I look at it objectively, I will give her stuff her dues. Rebels, the Clone Wars expansions, Rogue One, parts of Mandalorian. There's parts of shows like Andor feels like a really good show, but
You've used an interesting word, objectively. What do you think Disney cares about, objectively speaking? Do you think
they wanted to make Charles? Do you think they made back their total investment, or
yes, and then some? Yes, just on the movie releases, they made over $10 billion. They paid $4 for it.
That's good money.
It is good.
They don't care what you have to say. They care about their investment.
But
and they're doing just
Charles,
fine.
But why were they the first and this was under Kennedy's reign as well. And I could probably find the article still. Why did they call fans who didn't like the story the fandom menace?
Disney called them that?
No, that's other people that.
Yeah, that's not Disney.
Yeah. Fair point. So I guess now we can play.
Objectively speaking, Disney cares about money, and they keep making money. So that's the only objectively speaking thing that matters to that group.
I'm with you, Charles, and it's true, and maybe that's why she's still around. Maybe that's one of the reasons she's still around, because they're making money. Maybe not a lot, or maybe not as much as they wished or hoped for, but they're making money. Otherwise, she would be out.
If I gave you $10 in 2015 and you came back and gave me 25 5 years later, would you be all right with that? That's kind of what they did.
Yeah.
There hasn't been a Star Wars film in 5 years.
That's true. Maybe they're a bit scared, but
they're doing enough messing up with Marvel as it is. They gotta tend their wounds.
I like that. That's amazing.
Anyway, but at the same time, I said, I'm not going to, if I get in there, I'm just going to cause trouble, because they're not going to do what I want them to do. So I don't have the control to do that anymore. And all I would do is muck everything up.
He made similar comments in 2024 during his panel discussion at the Cannes Film Festival. On a personal front, I actually find this extremely annoying, because this whole time, it seems, Kathleen Kennedy has been acting like she cares about George Lucas's ideas.
I think there's many things that make a great Star Wars story. You know, the incredible thing that George left us was amazing mythology. And it's very...
Does she really believe that? I'm wondering, because they changed so much and they don't even want to listen to him. If that was such an amazing mythology and such, why don't you like try to ask him for more advice or more ideas to expand on that? I don't know.
They just played the clip. He didn't like the fact he didn't have control and he would just muck things up. So
Yeah.
they're both in a spot where he
No, but
doesn't
her
want
saying that they liked it, but then not even continue it. Like they've altered stories like beyond just modifying from book to story. They've completely rewritten things and have destroyed his mythology.
Yeah, but the stuff from the books isn't exactly his mythology. I think when she's referencing is the Skywalker trilogy and where that left off.
I'm not even talking about the movies. I'm just talking about stuff in the stories. They've changed lore. Even in Mandalorian, I can't remember exactly what, but small things that all add up together. Like, I keep going back to this, but the Acolyte ruined a lot of canon and history.
Yeah, but wasn't Dave Filoni supposed to be that sort of transitionary character to help them from Clone Wars through?
He's helped, and I think he sort of said, like, and that's where he's lost some credit for me, is he sort of said the Acolyte was good, but Dave did so much damage to the lore. Like, I'm guessing it's going to get the Willow treatment and be erased within the next year or so.
So I'm wondering if any of you would like to add more before we play.
So in private chat, I showed the article about the Star Wars influence. It came from in the early. It was 2012 article from someone who was dealing with, and it's been leaked, changed out over the years, where Star Wars, and I could probably find one of the other ones that I know of, they called their fans toxic. So, like, when you hear of Doomcock called themselves the fandom menace, it comes from one of the original, that blog article right there. There's an article that was mentioned because when they started getting into the stuff and the later projects was like 7, when they wanted to do 7, 8, and 9, they were reading that people didn't like the directions of the story, or some of the stories didn't make sense. They called it either toxic fandom or the fandom menace.
The first thing when the teaser came out, the first thing that the internet complained about was the fact that a stormtrooper was black.
Okay, so
with no story.
Do you want to know?
True, Charles.
Do you want to? Okay, that I'll agree. Internet stuff is stupid.
That's a hell of a first step, then, don't you think?
Do you know the people who actually hate? You know what we thought when we first saw The Force Awakens?
The film or the trailer?
We saw it. We thought they were going to go with the storyline with the will of the Greys. The will of the Greys has been teased for so long.
Is that character black? Like, I don't understand what a black stormtrooper has to do with the story of the will of the Greys. I don't remember hearing people saying, "Oh, they're going with the will of the Greys." There's no black stormtroopers. There was no subtext that said, "Oh, by the way, it's because of the will of the Greys."
No.
It was black stormtrooper, and when the movie came out, it was, "Oh no, forget that stuff. There's this girl here, and she's a Mary Sue."
Okay, but here's two sides. When the fans looked at the Force of that movie, Disney had Mandalore. Correct me if I'm wrong. Have they hinted at the prophecy of the Greys through Rebels? This is one of the big canon things they have talked about. The Greys, the prophecy of the Greys is the idea that was part of the marketing. But
I will be honest, D-Lord, I never heard about the Greys before you mentioned
this
that.
Is the first time I'm hearing it.
Watch Clone Wars. It was brought up in Clone Wars at the end.
Rebels, it's also in Rebels 2.
Rebels 2 came out after Force Awakens. Force Awakens was like a cinematic way of jolting this system and telling people, "Hey, look, We're doing
have the
Star Wars,
idea.
not doing all green.
The prophecy of the Greys, that's actually what we all thought. It's been in the lore for ages.
I'll have to check, but I don't recall the prophecy of the Greys being at the forefront.
And actually,
of
I
teaser.
didn't hear about that before you guys.
Rebel Season 1 came out in 2014. The Force Awakens came out in 2015. So Rebels came out first.
So in the idea,
you just said Rebel Season 2.
No, I said it's in Rebels. So Rebels themselves, I didn't say season.
You mean as well?
It's been in. It was cooked into Rebels. It's been cooked into a lot of the Disney.
Cooked in is not telling you. That is subtext. Cooked
and
in.
No one ever had an issue, Charles. Charles, no one ever had an issue like with the fans, like people when they said they saw the Force Awakens. I instantly,
dude, I'm talking about. So the trailer.
You're talking about
the teaser trailer came out Thanksgiving 2014. People saw that 40 seconds of footage and said, "Oh, Black Stormtrooper, not down with this."
Let me just point out, back then when this trailer first came out, I wasn't as big into Star Wars, but I was paying attention because I liked Star Wars at one point. I never heard the majority of people complaining about blacks. Actually, a lot of people said it looked cool. No, I didn't hear much complaining about the Black Stormtrooper.
But I did hear about these complaints as well.
Wait, you did or you didn't?
I did hear about.
Well, I'm not saying it wasn't happening. I'm not
Stormtrooper.
saying it didn't happen. It wasn't that mainstream from what I heard.
There's a pattern of behavior. If you're Disney, it's Black Stormtrooper, it's Mary Sue Girl, and then whatever happened with Last Jedi, and then
I actually really enjoy Rey. She was a Mary Sue.
Okay, all right. So you're not part of the problem that Disney is calling toxic, or some person named Tom Morris is getting credit for Disney. You say words like Disney said this, and then you say words like they told us this was going to happen, and then it becomes
it extends from
baked in does not mean they told us up front.
Because there's minor in the lore. They call them the wills.
So now it's minor in the lore. So it's becoming less and less a big deal as this conversation happens.
No, it's a big deal that's been hinted upon. It's since Clone Wars. No,
I always hint something that I really want.
Clone Wars has been hinting on origins of the universe and the origins of the Force. They don't give the whole story out. They keep adding more and more to it and hinting in it. The big reveal of the wills, which was actually mentioned, which George Lucas actually talked about in the during the original filmings, was the wills, and that the book about this book that written in was this whole detail. Was first actually they were first finally introduced in Clone Wars, and it was this huge moment.
The will, it's WHILLS. Wills of the Greys. It's the idea where everyone gave that film a fair shake. You have to understand. You have to, just like every franchise, you have to bring new fans in. The thing is, you have an entire cameo. Most people hated Kylo Ren because Kylo Ren is just Jace Solo.
Do you know what the highest grossing film in North American history is?
The Force Awakens.
Force Awakens is the highest grossing film in North America history.
Okay.
So I think they got around to some new eyes is what my point is.
How much was the drop off between that and The Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker?
As much as there was a drop off, let's just admit the first one did money.
No, but the first one did money doesn't prove it was good. Bad movies get money because everyone wants to see how bad it is, or everyone just wants to see it.
So people who you want to get eyes on the thing, they're going to go see it just to see how bad it is. Why are movies like Morbius not making $1 billion? That doesn't make sense. And the original point was Disney jumped out with Force Awakens. That was the first thing that they were saying. We're here. We're back. Star Wars is back. You're talking about something that happens 2 years later, 4 years later, but they're introduction to the
no
world
one
was
really
Force
started
Awakens.
hating on it until they started hearing it was not considered, even if you go back to the early, like Lucas's one of the last films he ever wanted to really work on was the prequel trilogy. It's because the idea was, and he said, I may not write the next 3. I have ideas. You have the extended universe. The idea, right, is no one ever said it because, and most of the people who had criticism of The Force Awakens wasn't about that. With some of the fans, they're like, we knew she was a Palpatine without her saying it. Only one person shown in some of the lore as well as the film attacked Kylo like that.
So this started with toxic fans, and you're making it about lore.
No, what I'm saying
it started.
No, what I'm saying is
with,
eventually the fans did not like. Most people gave The Force Awakens a proper shake. Yeah. They gave it a proper.
Sure.
They gave it that.
But the vocal minority was pretty toxic.
That's true. And I gotta say, I think we've been doing a circle around. So all I can say now is I think it made money. Is it the best movie out there? It's up to you and opinions, I guess. But it made money, and that's a fact.
So I will say this though, on this idea of the plot, no one ever said, they said Rey potentially wasn't, because instantly a lot of people, it wasn't like the Star Wars theory in that idea. The fans were going to give it and to see where they were going to go. We thought she was just going to be
Kenobi's was Kenobi's daughter.
We actually, the idea they said that, then she did the whole Palpatine scream and broke that comes from Revenge of the Sith fight scene. But
if there's something that you can give a daring score, a damning score to Disney and the way they handled Star Wars, was they didn't know what they were doing. They did one and they just kind of played it by ear. They didn't have a trilogy set in mind. They just handed the next one off. And then when that didn't work, they just handed it back to JJ. There was no complete story before they started filming. It just got worse and worse, and they overreacted to what people were saying.
Yeah. The Last Jedi, yes or no? Why would you bring on Rian Johnson, who had no plan? He, even to this day, he said, I would never change anything about the script.
Like, he actually had a full script in mind. Like, he had an actual explanation of who Snoke was in that movie, and it was talked about, and then it was handed over to someone else, and that never happened. It had to happen later on in a book.
Yes, the major Snoke book that actually talks about what Snoke was. Why did the battle of that planet happen? Because no one really had like the weird change in the lore. Palpatine said, well, if I die, I'm going to take the Empire with me.
What year was Force Awakens released?
2014.
December of 15.
Oh, I was close.
Last Jedi was released December of 2018?
Last Jedi was 2019. 2017.
17.
17, yeah.
They had 2 years. When do you think they started filming Last Jedi?
2015, most likely.
Right
after the first one.
Assuming about a year or two production.
Yeah, so it's not like they had time to really sit on the success. They just kept going.
Yeah.
But it also depends on
the other one was 2019, so like they didn't really think, they just went for it.
They had 3 movies in 4 years.
Yeah, which
Quick
is a
side
lot.
question before we move on from this. Am I the only one who, when I watched The Force Awakens, thought, what's his name? Oh my God. Finn was supposed to be mentally slow. The character, it just, no, I'm not trying to be insulting.
No, you're fine. I'm fine because, okay, the idea, right?
The way he repeated things, like the way he sort of wasn't quite sure of what he was doing, like it just,
You're actually right.
like he just sort of like when he was saying my name is Finn, and he was just kind of repeating, going, "Yes, I'm here to release you." Like, he didn't know what he was saying. Like he just came off as slow.
By the way, no one really hated Finn because, like, the idea of the First Order, when you saw the plot they were going for, you're like, okay, so they're taking the Solo twins, which was Jason and then the other one. They just made Kylo Ren. What is it? The J Solo, who got turned to the dark side, then eventually had to be killed. And you had that.
You keep bringing like this additional headcanon into the things where I was paying attention quite a bit in 2014. They very specifically announced that all of those novels and things, they're not canon.
Yeah, they get the idea.
They just want to
but
bring.
They did draw it from a story, but it's the
point is they were just worried about the internet and how ostracized the prequels were, and they wanted to make Star Wars something special again, and just based on the cinematic experience. I don't think any of what you're talking about, it was remotely at the forefront.
Yeah,
it was just make something in camera.
So the idea
that's fun, D-Lord, but I will put you on timeout now because I feel like we talked a lot about that, and it's been like 15 minutes with debate.
One thing I will say is I didn't hear a lot of complaints about The Force Awakens until The Last Jedi. The Last Jedi combined with The Force Awakens is where people really started hating. Like, there was the Mary Sue comments, there was all these comments, but it wasn't until you added the second movie which things started really falling apart because things just weren't connecting. Things were just kind of...
I think that what I remember the biggest complaints being is that they're not the characters that they know, which is odd because the complaints that came out for Force Awakens was it's too samey. So by Disney's logic, you have to like one of them, because if you want something that's too samey, you've got Force Awakens. If you want something different, you should be liking the direction Last Jedi is going in. But it seemed like everyone's voice had the same volume, and then Rise of Skywalker happened, and that.
See, without getting into it one day, I'll just see, because the idea of Rey as a character, they called Rey the character with the cardboard box, basically. Like, no one has an issue with a strong female lead in Star Wars. No one's going to say a random Force user appears and BTFOs people. No one's going to do that, because every so often, even by lore standards, someone comes along in the Force and rebalances it. It's always been a thing.
And we said it many times, D-Lord, so it's okay. We get it. We understand now. I guess I suggest we move on a bit, because now we've been talking about The Force Awakens for like way too long. And it was interesting.
Not enough.
Not enough? Okay.
No, I'm kidding.
Like, there's still like another like 15 minutes. So I'm curious to hear about more.
Very expansive, and it has meaning. That was the thing that George said to me over and over again, is whatever you do, make sure it has meaning.
If you guys have watched an earlier video that I made about this topic, you will know how much I love this other clip of Kathleen Kennedy and J.J. Abrams, the man who helped work on The Force Awakens, talk about George Lucas like he's dead.
There isn't a day that goes by or went by as we were making the movie where we don't talk about George. You know, it's the standard, what would George do?
Yeah, it's crazy. I'm told that you can just pick up the phone and call people sometimes when you want to know what they would do. Or, I don't know, better yet, you could just, not throw away their ideas. Kathleen Kennedy strikes me as a very disingenuous person, and it really rubs me the wrong way. Anyway,
any thoughts on that? Is she disingenuous?
That was the common sentiment when you saw her. Because, like, when she did the marketing the Force is female thing, she did that. And a lot of people were like, even though she's the executive producer who possibly has the idea what it's greenlit, I mean, Charles may not like this idea, she does have a hand in the creative process. She may not fire the final script off as far as have her input. She still has the lead and the input. So the idea is the power of one, the power of two, and the power of many thing from Acolyte cringe. It's the idea.
You think Kathleen Kennedy's on set for every piece of dialogue?
I think I do think a lot of the projects ran by her.
She cannot be everywhere, D-Lord. I'm sorry, but like
I think she has the I think
she has doesn't let things just fly by without her checking them.
Yeah, it's like a base idea, like, okay, how much does this cost? And then they sign off on it. You have people underneath them.
I would hope there's
she probably hired someone else between like Edlin and herself that gave her like the big important things she needs to know, and she's like,
whoever approved that budget should be fired.
This I agree.
So the clip that they played before of George Lucas talking about his part of the severance, is that in this video we're watching right here, or is that you put those two together? Okay,
it's
so
the same.
There's two interviews. There's two interviews.
So very clearly, George Lucas says that the reason he couldn't be on is because he would have messed things up. So that answers her question that I don't know if she edited this, but it very clearly answers her rhetorical question right here. George Lucas said it himself.
That came from a 60. I swear it came from either a 60-minute interview years
ago. But
later.
Who was the face with the words coming out?
It was Lucas himself.
Okay, doesn't matter where it came from. It's the guy himself saying it.
Yeah, that's true.
But there's a point arguing over about how a fandom devolves. I'm not saying about it in what you want people in your seats.
But when you believe someone who says I couldn't be involved because I would have wanted to take control and I would have messed things up, that's him saying, yeah, no, I can't do this being underneath someone. That's him saying, yeah, I can't do it.
His idea is different. That's also him saying what he has plans and ideas of what the Star Wars universe is doesn't mesh with their new current idea.
Yeah,
he's not much of a collaborator.
It's not just a megalomaniac act, which you're trying to portray it as. It's also, this is how Star Wars is in my head and how it was written for years. What they're doing is garbage, and if I get in, I'm going to tell them all to shut the fuck up.
Right. Yeah, it wouldn't work that way.
Like, I'm arguing if I would say some of the later projects that wound up coming out had better set design and alien design, like Skeleton Crew. Even me and Mandalore said this.
Okay, this has nothing to do with George Lucas. And
yeah, that's true, D-Lord. So that tension, and you will repeat stuff we already mentioned many times in many other streams. So I will ask you guys if we had anything else or if we can play. I guess we can play.
The Force Awakens did perfectly fine at the box office, but it was a masterclass in how to fracture a fan base. And depressingly for many Star Wars fans, it also set the stage for what was to come. Lucas had his flaws, that much is true, but he kept the original trilogy on some sort of a leash. Kennedy, on the other hand, has acted seemingly for years with no real rhyme or reason, which has continued to leave fans confused and angry. The Force Awakens teased.
Well, I'd say maybe the reason why Kathleen Kennedy was doing that, it's because she thought that would make money. That's the only guess I got, because, I mean, you want money, otherwise you lose your job. I don't know.
They did the inverse of what Marvel did, and they just kind of played everything by the seat of their pants. Like, it was like free money to them. And it was for a bit. The fact that they didn't plan things out and reacted and then counter-reacted to what the fans were saying is you're cooked if you start doing things like that. And the fact that they made their sequel trilogy like the thing for Star Wars returning, but they didn't have it set in stone when they started filming, and has such a tight schedule. I don't know. Rise of Skywalker is just like the perfect absolute mess to finish off that 4-year period.
Their biggest mistake was they killed off the wrong characters. I know what's his name wanted to be killed off since Empire Strikes Back, and I know they would never know who that Carrie Fisher was going to die. But
yeah,
the way they handled all that was just garbage. Like,
Yeah, I think Carrie
kill them
Fisher
all off or
literally
don't?
dying might have. I think they planned on her dying in the third one, and that kind of. Not that it helped,
They
but it
weren't
certainly.
planning on her dying of drug OD or a complication. And then they green screened her in for the film.
And then they had to still bring in Han for the Vision because they couldn't green screen a whole conversation with Kylo, which made even more no sense. Like,
Recast. No, I'm joking. I guess we can play.
Audiences with a fresh start, but by the time The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker rolled around, Lucasfilm was scrambling to glue the pieces of the Star Wars world back together with Palpatine duct tape. And this is about where a lot of fans feel that Star Wars stands today. And sure, a new successor can come in and start steering the ship, but they're inevitably inheriting a hull full of holes. It's worth remembering that Kennedy and her team have left a graveyard of projects in their wake. The Rian Johnson trilogy, by the way, that's a really dumb way of spelling Ryan, the Lando film, Star Wars Detours, the Taika Waititi film, Rogue Squadron are just a few titles announced and either
I see all of that, and I must add, I feel like they wanted too many projects, and they wanted to, as you said earlier, Charles, they wanted to replicate or duplicate the Marvel formula, but with Star Wars. And
it's not even that. They were also just, they saw how well Mandalorian was doing, going, oh, we've actually figured it out. We're doing it. And they started playing all these shows because the original Mando season 2 was in that lineup of stuff. But they just, some of the stuff that they dropped was actually really good.
Actually, I'm okay with that. My battery is drained, and I'm sure I'll be fine.
What was that?
What
What's
happened?
going on?
DJ Rex, I'm sorry. One of my droids. No, it's just Rian Johnson trilogy. That was a kind of good timing. The Rian Johnson trilogy was, I'm glad. The guy who did the Thor movies. I'm so glad those were canceled.
Well, the other thing is the internet movie world can't function without just something to talk about. The second word there is rumors. Movie, YouTube, movie, social media is just so caught up in like a sniff of any sort of news that isn't really news. Some of it is probably, I don't know how much Disney would have released, but don't they have that thing every May where they like their version of Comic-Con every May
Star
4th?
Wars Day or Star Wars Celebration? I can't remember.
It's Star Wars Celebration, or it's like their Star Wars.
But they also have the Disney actual has their own thing, which goes
D23.
D23
Yeah.
and the Star Wars actually gets the two. They also get every other big convention. They always have something figure-wise or story-wise that they brought out at any sort of geek con that are big. NYCC, like all those.
Yeah.
Some sort of usually Star Wars as long as there actually is something to announce.
So they will usually announce every year during Star Wars Celebration whatever the new slate is or whatever they're working on for like the next year. Rogue Squadron, right? Because a lot of these projects, like I do go back and I do say legitly believe half the stuff that we were seeing, like Star Wars Visions, a lot of these other stuff, like the guys who did Game of Thrones, they were supposed to get a High Republic series. There was rumors that the High Republic series was back in. Brie Larson was supposed to have a major role in that.
Oh, I remember that.
And then, like, the Rian Johnson, the new trilogy, like, they've talked about projects off and on. But I will say, I think a lot of the television shows were made to have an interlocking feature.
Yes.
Like, if you see Skeleton Crew, even when we watched it, I said there was so many tie-ins to Rogue Squadron. And we have heard about Rogue Squadron was in production hell for like years. There is literally, you can just see either the script had been rewritten at some point to cover whatever they needed.
The only show that didn't have a tie-in really was the Acolyte.
I will let Shaw go on, and then I have something else to say.
No, go ahead.
Well, I feel like when you need to rewrite and always change stuff about your project, maybe just do another project instead of just trying to salvage the boat. I don't know. I feel like if you need to keep reworking on your thing, maybe your thing is too janky, and you should just build a new thing.
It's big studio-itis. They don't trust artistic minds. It's the same thing like they took Solo away from Lord and Miller. It just seems like every time that there's some sort of creative mind, they tend to go studio mode. I would stop releasing any sort of information if I were them, because you're not going to please everyone. There's going to be some pockets, and Star Wars fans are so vocal. There's going to be like 30% that want this thing, 30% that are just totally against it, and 30% that are like, yeah, I don't care. So like if you keep like leaking information like this, hoping that you're going to create buzz, it's not going to work. Just
the problem
trust.
is, if you don't release anything, or if you don't try and create any buzz, people forget about it and move on.
Oh, sure, but
you want to keep them going, and especially with Star Wars, they keep releasing new products. They keep trying to make money. If you don't go buzz, people are not going to go to Galaxy Edge anymore because there's nothing new.
But the wild thing is they pumped Acolyte for however long. Now that's canceled, and they had Skeleton Crew. They just had that on standby. They weren't going to properly release it. Then they put it out, and it's actually quite good. So like maybe you don't know what you think. Like just make the stuff and release it, and they're all supposed to be gambles anyway. And the sure thing nature in which they approached this Marvel ruined the thought process for a good decade there, and now everybody, especially Disney, is paying for it. So you can't just think everyone's going to show up. You've got to take risks, like what movies and TV shows used to be.
And I feel like the other thing should be, if you promote something, make sure that's probably your best project. And I feel like if they promoted more Skeleton Crew over the Acolyte, I think that would have been much better for both product, because then we wouldn't have that much backlash on Acolyte, because nobody would hear about that one, and maybe we would be praising Skeleton Crew. But
also, the part of all releasing for some things is to gauge reaction of. It's not even just create buzz. Some things they also want to gauge some reaction. Like they'll put something out, and some things will get more hate than love, or more love than hate, and they go by that. Skeleton Crew, even when it was first talked about in first images, it was always mid. Like no one was almost going, "Oh my god, I can't wait for that show! I can't wait for that show."
But so
Andor was a good example. Just once, Andor was a good example. There were people who loved Andor, but there was a majority of people who said, "Why?" Like the end of this, like going to end stories that they know how they end, and going, "Oh, let's do fill in some gaps, crap that no one even really cares about, and it's not overly impactful, and release it." That's why they dropped Andor even before season 1, from multiple seasons down to 2. They kept dropping it down until it was just down to 2 seasons, because it's a good idea, but it wasn't good enough to do many years.
Yeah, I think on both sides, whether it be the studio or the audience, you shouldn't expect a 10 out of 10 every time. I think I think what you were saying about Skeleton Crew, if we went into that expecting something kind of mid, which I had no expectations following Acolyte, and the fact that they had it shelved for a bit was kind of alarming to me. But after watching, I was really kind of okay with that. Not like it's something I would defend vigorously, but it was something where
visually, as I've said, it's visually spectacular. Story was mid in itself, and it was very lacking in certain parts. Like the very ending was a kind of a whole kind of crap on the whole story.
10-year-old me is jealous of me now for watching that. Like if I were 10, I'd be all about that.
But the whole Skeleton Crew, since it's first sort of talked about, just seeing the whole story even before we were watching it seemed mid. I think it was best to do it after such a crap show as the Acolyte. Like if you would have done the Skeleton Crew first, it would have been meh. It would have been super meh garbage. It
Well,
would be
it
horrible
would have
garbage.
been better than Acolyte, to be
No,
honest.
but after
because-
doing the yes. But if you didn't have the Acolyte to compare it to, it would have been, because the last thing before that was the Bad Batch, which was a good show. So to go to the next,
a bad release will overshadow a good release if it's down the pipeline.
yes,
Yeah.
Because this is a problem with some of the stuff, right? No one really said parts of Ahsoka. Like, you could have a lore breaking thing and it just be like, maybe explain it away. Like, Ahsoka was always going to be Rebel season 5. And it's fine if it felt that way. Because, okay, does that play into something later on? And you are right. The Marvelification model of Star Wars, that's why I said they planned out movies, they planned out stuff with
phases.
the occasional series, maybe to show something. Finish off, maybe give Filoni, Favreau his dues, whatever he needed to finish out his dream and his vision. But when it came down to where it stands and where Kathleen Kennedy, like, the idea, right? Maybe she hadn't been involved. Maybe Acolyte, because there was points where series like Acolyte, Skeleton Crew, we heard about it. It was rewritten or shelved at one point. Not as bad as like DC's Batgirl, where it was there, was it worked on, was it not? But the concept is, when you have this much slated, when well, you would know about this more. The idea is it does make stuff out because you have to go put, this is what we're spending money on and we're putting our effort into. This is the writing teams where they're involved. Then they go, oh shit, this show's not coming out. We have heard about Rogue Squadron as far back as 4 to 5 years. When people go, they want to see more Poe. Whatever else, right? We were like, oh, that's going to be Rogue Squadron. But that went into development hell. So, you got to understand, this is just my view. Like, a good series is going to be out like that. But come out and say a show like Skeleton Crew is Treasure Island meets Goonies meets Treasure Planet. Fine. Don't set it up as something. And of course it had some of the best alien design. But that's all lost, even if it's an execution for a kid's show. No, this is just a kid's show. That's not a way they originally had it marketed. It was probably going to be a pirate lore. It might have been an Outer Rim series.
Do you know where I see the whole sort of collapse of the shows and starting from? What was that show that they were supposed to do along with Rogue Squadron?
I have no idea.
Marshals of the New Republic or something.
Rangers.
Wow.
You're talking about Rangers?
Rangers of the New Republic.
Rangers of the New Republic's been.
And that was supposed to be led by Gina Carano, I think. Was supposed to be one of the main characters in that.
She got fired.
They were setting her up to lead that show after Mando season 2. And then after that, after she got fired, because I think Rogue Squadrons was supposed to be based on, sort of connect to that and be a continuation of that in a sort of different way. And you take away that, and they're trying to have all these things connected. It's like Marvel. You take out one piece, and they don't, and then the whole thing collapses. I think the whole finding of Gina Carano made their whole sort of empire sort of collapse on there, because I think the final story, or the final of this phase, is if they're going by Marvel sort of, is the Thrawn trilogy. Because you can tell, like in Ahsoka and whatnot, and even in Mandalorian season 2, they're leading up to that.
Yeah, that's
interesting. They're leading up to Heir of the Empire, because even in Mando, you see what's his name? You see the cloning stuff start for the sequel trilogy. You see, like the Shadow Council. Like, all this is leading up to what's going to happen. And that's where a lot of people got upset, was they were hoping that the new Mandoverse was going to rewrite the sequel trilogy that they were going to cancel. But the problem is, once Carrie Fisher died, you can't undo it. Once she died, you can't rewrite things, because then that would be an insult to her. Not whether she hated it or not, or liked it or not, you can't. That's her last acting gigs. You can't sort of wipe that out. You have to respect her legacy. So they're working, and they weren't even planning even if she died, but they're working into that. So I think that's what the whole thing is. But by firing Gina Carano, they sort of took out one thing, and they never had a backup plan in case that failed. They keep going, well, this is going to lead into this, which is going to hint into this, which is going to do this, and it's all connected. And as D-Lord and you said, that Rogue Squadron was very clearly in Skeleton Crew, and it was supposed to be part of it.
Yeah.
Because that's who comes in the end, who rescues them, that you see them a couple times. That was Rogue Squadron. But because they sort of took out things that led into that, they took out Rogue Squadron, no one knows who they are.
Yeah. I guess now we can play and see what else is to say.
Are put on ice. And when they weren't outright canceling projects, ones that performed badly or weren't financially viable were put on Disney+. With Kennedy's leadership, the company has announced so many projects, but have failed to follow through, making Lucasfilm an unreliable narrator of its own business plan. Beyond that, she has been instrumental in the company going down the corporate feminist pro-diversity route, like I mentioned before, ham-fisting this messaging into the Star Wars franchise.
So my character, you know, she's a powerful leader. She's a powerful leader. Yes. In a very woman-centered world, which I was very excited to kind of be in that, because I feel like
when I see that, it's funny because you get to see other interviews where they're like, there's not enough women, and then she says it's female-centered. Just saying that, it's funny.
Who the hell is that?
Like themselves. Huh?
Who is that?
That's the one that played that is the one that played the mother.
Oh,
the head witch. The head witch.
Yeah, and I guess we can play now because I don't want to go too far there, but I feel like they contradict themselves in promoting stuff.
Star Wars is very, like, patriarchal.
I guess Princess Leia means nothing to you. And Padme. What do you mean? I'm not gonna lie, it's actually pretty hard for me to take Jodie Turner-Smith's opinion seriously about anything, given that she accepted a role as Anne Boleyn, the literal woman who existed in the history, the white English woman who married Henry VIII and played her in a show. I have trouble. With this. Jodie, like, girl, I don't really think you're equipped to talk about any of this. It's worth mentioning that Kathleen Kennedy's influence will probably continue to live on, thanks to the people that she'll leave around at the company. Some of you might remember a clip from back in 2012 where Kennedy talked about filling more and more roles at Lucasfilm with women, telling more women-led stories, and creating more female protagonists.
They very much support the fact that we are trying to grow in the workforce a number of women in executive positions and in all positions inside the.
I think it's fine. I think the idea is cool, but the execution might be lacking because then it's at other people's expense. So it's not really about equality. It's more about pushing for people.
Not hiring based on qualifications is hired on sex, which is discrimination.
Yeah. Any thoughts, Charles?
I wasn't here. I'm sorry.
So as a recap, she's like, oh yeah, I want to place more women in charge, and that's one of my goals. And I'm like, the idea is really cool, but it's lacking in its execution, where they don't really hire the competent woman. They push for any woman, and it's not really skill based. It's really like to uplift one gender at the other one expense. So that's basically what I'm trying to say.
What it is, it's big corporation talk where they, put fucking rainbows on the Coca-Cola can, and yeah, we're allies. What they should do is just do it, get someone that's qualified, and then when the thing's a success, say, hey, oh, by the way, this was made by a woman or a gay person or a black man or whatever. But they want to do that executive, give us credit for social stuff.
Well, and as I talked about earlier, it's not just having a gay character in a story. They have to force you that the character is gay and in your face. It doesn't. The story doesn't. The person being gay doesn't affect the story.
It's irrelevant to this story. And if the movie's going to China, they just cut it out. So, like, just how much are you behind this as a movement? It's it's executive nonsense talk. I'll give you that here. It's a gross look.
What was that Disney movie that just went to China where the main the Falcon movie, where he was barely even on the posters in China, where they shrunk or because it's China.
And so just like, here's let me say this on the thing, and this can go back. You can trace this back a little years. Disney has been involved. Like, I think as of last year, they had 4 class action lawsuits on them. One was because they were being charged, like, not charged, but there was accusations in the company around, like, so there was, I don't know if you remember the thing about the Disney tapes. They talk about executives said, "Oh, we were told to hire by DEI," and then they put it on flyers that they were only hiring for that. You're right, Charles. It's basically like the corporate idea. And then they got caught by a bunch of women and other, like one of the class action lawsuits, I don't know if it's still going or was settled, was a bunch of women suing Disney saying they weren't getting their fair share or the proper shake. It is clearly like a company policy where they're saying we are going to pander, we are going to attempt to give this, but it's clearly they had like at least 4 class action lawsuits against them I know of. And one is these, they had to acknowledge, they go, yeah, but publicly we can't.
Match the background. My background matches that background.
So you're good. But you get what I'm saying, Charles. Like, this has been going on for Disney for like 5-6 years. And they have suits over it. Now, the question of how much was this pandering? How much was this in their corporate culture? How much was this driven not by her, by best wishes? But
if they made quality stuff, we wouldn't be talking about it. But they forced this social thing down, and it wasn't quality stuff. So, like, when you're only talking about the people behind the creation, then it makes it look that much worse.
I'm with you, man. I guess we can play now.
Company, and with the movies that we're making, and with the protagonists that we're putting in the stories. So I get a huge amount of support with that. But we have 50% of our executive team are women. Mm-hmm. And 6 out of 8 of the people in my story group are women. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that would be surprised that we're making Star Wars movies and the majority of the people involved in the development of those stories are women. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's making a huge difference in the stories that we're trying to tell. I also, I feel it is going to happen. We are going to hire a woman who's going to direct a Star Wars movie. I have no doubt.
She used this same influence to create what started off as a female-only writers group charged with managing Star Wars canon. This group includes men now, don't you worry. Can't speak to the overall masculinity of those men, but it includes them nonetheless. Given that Kennedy has had 13 years to enact her desired changes and elevate.
That's weird.
This group includes men now, don't you worry. Can't speak to the overall masculinity of those men, but it includes them nonetheless. Given that Kennedy has had 13 years to enact her desired changes and elevating women to positions of power and authority in the company for seemingly no other reason than the fact that they're women, it seems that even if she did leave, I don't really know how meaningfully or how quickly changes would actually take place. I don't know if I articulated myself very well there. I don't know how quickly or even if the company could recover. I hope it could, with, you know, maybe some Doge department treatment, but it's, you know, I'm a negative Nancy here. It's kind of unlikely. Please don't yell at me in the comments. As I have said numerous times, and I'm going to repeat myself because I think it's important, I have absolutely no problem with female creatives in the entertainment space.
Considering
I
you're
also
female,
have no problem with female protagonists, female characters, and female-led and female-based stories. But all of this revolves around the idea and the fact that those stories and characters are well written, and the females who are in those creative positions are there based on merit rather than sex. The trouble, it seems, with Kennedy's Lucasfilm is that merit doesn't really matter. She has a track record of elevating activist-type women to positions of power and authority who
I think that's part of what went wrong. If you hire activists, they are there more for the message they want to promote than the story they want to tell. They are not there to entertain people. They are there to preach at others. Maybe I'm crazy. I don't know. Any thoughts on that?
Can you separate? The question is, can you separate the art from the artist? That's part of it. The problem with modern day activists is usually they cannot separate with what they want when they get into a project, because we're seeing this in the video game industry. There's devs that are like, don't blame us. The higher ups told us to do this. But you're the one who pitched the idea to them. So it turns out how much of... Remember what we said about Acolyte? Acolyte with a problem between two sisters, and Lindsay Headland supposedly had therapy sessions or an issue with her sister. Maybe it's an IRL therapy session. Now, it's not always going to make the best writing. Then you can get these other activists who want a dream and a vision. They'll say what they say on the side, but if they are given enough of a control over something, they'll probably put that into it, or it leaks. It is also the phrase, write what you know. But that's usually what I say. Write what you know.
But she wrote about two sisters.
Well, to be fair, does that make sense? Like, maybe that
she wrote about what she knows and put it in the Star Wars universe.
So if you write about what you know,
which
sometimes
Acolyte is basically about two sisters.
Yes.
Yeah. But I feel like the
She did.
surrounding thing were not maybe good enough, because I mean, most people I know didn't really enjoy the show.
I don't think it deserves any credit in either direction. I think it's awfully, I don't know why that much money was involved. I don't think it's great. I certainly don't think it's the worst thing in the world.
So Obi-Wan, right? I remember when Obi-Wan was announced, they said, "Oh, we picked a woman director." You know, like they kind of laid out what her vision was for Obi-Wan. No one really shit on that. It was like, let's wait and see what you do with Obi-Wan. There's parts of Obi-Wan that I liked, and there's parts of it I thought were really stupid and lore breaking. But bear in mind, they announced it was that director. Then they have announced that she's potentially going to have other projects. But, I mean, she produced a half-decent show. But when I mean activists usually write what they know. And I'm just saying, that's just, it's weird. That's writing, but when you hire people who are potentially activists, don't be shocked. And the whole thing of promoting talent. So,
like hiring your wife.
So, like, how do I put it? And I'd love to see Charles' idea. Do you hire on merit, or what checks a box if you are making a script? Because if you're hiring someone, like, go, okay, what have you worked on in the past? Let me see if I can give you a test for the reins. But if you're hiring someone to check a checkbox, that's probably going to end badly, because you're taking, I think it's a meritocracy out of it. It doesn't have to be you hire qualified individuals for the job. But
any thoughts on that? Or we said enough about it? I guess we said enough about it.
Who is this? Who is this content creator?
Sydney Watson. I think you have heard about her, maybe.
I don't think I have, but
oh, okay. Well, yeah, that's her. So I linked in the description of this video or video, so people can track down and find the original video. But yeah, I guess we can play now.
No real track record to speak of. The initial leader of her writers group, Kiri Hart, had no real notable experience in the industry before she filled this role, and she went on to hire 2 additional women who also had no notable experience in the industry. Kennedy hired Victoria Mahoney for Rise of Skywalker, excited about the fact that Mahoney was the first female director at Star Wars, but she similarly lacked any meaningful experience to be in this role, and Rise ended up being borderline incoherent, at least in my opinion. But I personally think the most
Hold on.
egregious person to be
Okay.
part of these
Well,
DEI
well,
hires is
timestamping.
none other
It's
than
only
Leslie.
for on the screen.
I was timestamping. Okay, what did you want to say, John?
Who directed Rise of Skywalker?
Do you want me to go back?
I know it's J.J. Abrams, but why are they saying that this person before this lady is the director of Rise of Skywalker?
They said she said the article, they put a article out. It was the first female. They announced it like a virtue signal.
Okay. I don't know. Considering what we got, I would like to see what she would have done with it. It's getting angry about something that didn't happen.
One thing I just want to insert is they keep pushing this woman aspect into Star Wars, and it's fine to hire whoever's qualified, no matter what gender or sex, but they're trying to turn Star Wars into a female-led, like a female sort of fan fiction. But the majority of the fans are still male, 6 to 10. So I'm not saying you can't have female things and there aren't female leads, but pushing it just to be sort of like more female is just like you're shitting on the fans who built it up.
Don't you think we're looking at something that's kind of cherry picked, though? I mean, how many times, if you're sitting and watching Star Wars Celebration, do they talk about boys, girls, men, women? It like this is kind of
actually in a lot of Star Wars
deceptive with the way it's edited.
Actually, in a lot of the Star Wars stuff, they've been talking more female power, female led, and any criticism is because it's female. It's actually been a very common theme, and that's why a lot of people have been shitting on it, is because they talk about this. It's not just there's females in it and it's just people shit on it. They've been pushing it, and they've been very openly pushing it. This isn't just...
See, I feel like, listen, whatever Disneyfication has happened is dog shit. I don't like the way the studio is handling anything, especially recently. But I feel like what they've tried to do with the Star Wars brand, especially on Disney Plus, is they've tried to adhere to a bunch of different audiences. Like I would say Skeleton Crew is more for a kid audience. They have those weird cartoons that are, I don't know, they look like Funko Pops. Those are for kids. I think they're trying to make something towards women here. And I would say Andor coming up is probably more geared towards a classic audience. I think they're trying to cover every base. And because Star Wars of the past is not so synonymous with I don't know, being welcoming to women, they're trying to make note of that. Not well. I agree with that.
No, because they're going too opposite. It's sort of like femininity, or not femininity. Feminism used to be equality. Now it's better than, and that's what they're doing.
Yeah, I just don't. I don't think that like there isn't Star Wars content that doesn't feature men. I guess is what I'm trying to say. They're.
It's not that it's not featuring men. It's that they're pushing a certain narrative.
I don't think Andor does that.
Me neither. But I gotta say something.
They got away with just the minority thing because they keep pushing about how he's the first.
So is it about sex or is it skin color? I mean, Andor, it's led by a guy.
Umbrella.
I'm sorry if we're worried about someone's skin color over the character in the story, it falls right into what they're complaining about.
See, Andor was the weird one because Andor turned out. So you have two types of stories in Star Wars in reality, right? You have Jedi and non-Jedi related. Force-related stories or not Force-related stories. Andor arguably ticked a box like, oh, it's a person who either dies or was involved in another film, right? His character. But it does a trigger of, it scratches that itch of it tells the human side of the experience in Star Wars. So it got its praise. People walked into that show thinking it was either going to be bad or be mid. It turned out to be good.
Yeah.
And the thing about, but then when you see other projects, like I agree with you, Charles. The Skeleton Crew seemed like it was marketed towards more kids that was going to feed something
But
else.
no, you have to think of Star Wars. You had a talking dog person. You had a talking trash can. You had a talking robot. It wasn't about skin color. It wasn't about gender back then. But when you make everything about skin color and gender, I get it. They're a little heavy with the girl power stuff. But when it starts becoming about skin color, it's like it's not about gender anymore. It's just about no white men, and that's a problem. If it's good, what does it matter what type of person it is? A good dog person, a good garbage can. I'm not saying you specifically. I'm just saying when it gets down.
Say is we just want content. We don't care because we've said that there's never ever been a positive woman until Urso. It's like Leia, Padme. There's been many who might not have been the main focus, but there's been many females. People talk. Oh, and in Legends, Mara Jade and all that.
Well,
and then they bring up and then they bring up black people and go Lando. People loved Lando, and they ignore the people, and they say we have to force them to be this when it might not be the best character.
What was the problem with the Lando project? It wasn't that they said he was black. They turned him into Han Solo movie. Oh, he's just pansexual, want to screw over his robots. And I think Billy D. Williams was like, WTF, what are you doing to my character?
He's like, yeah, that's not how Lando was.
And I gotta say this, to be more constructive, because we've been bashing a lot. I feel like if they want a more female audience, I will sound very sexist, but like my girlfriend is into romance. And I know she is not the only one. So why not making a Star Wars project about romance and not necessarily about Jedi and such? Maybe it won't necessarily be Star Wars like we know it, but that would surely work.
You could do an
There's
all.
always been female Star Wars fans since A New Hope. You may not have been the majority, but there's always been fans who enjoyed it for how it was.
Yeah, the end of Empire, Leia says, I love you. And Han says, the way he does, he says, I know. Like that's in their own special way. That's an element of romance.
But basically how Mara Jade was introduced to Luke Skywalker. She was raised by the Emperor to be like an assassin or an successor to Vader. Turned out to be a love interest, and in the story, she was used that way.
She was the hand of the Emperor, wasn't she?
Yeah, she was like force sensitive and an assassin. She was eyed as a potential replacement too.
But there's always been, but Star Wars has never been the first main plot is romance. Like people force the Reylo. People when they heard. People complain, and this was one of my biggest complaints. The same people who complain about Palpatine coming back, it's like, he came back, blah, blah. We're saying that Kylo Ren forced it because there was talks about Rey was going to be pregnant and have a child in the next generation. And they said, the same fan fiction was, oh, Kylo Ren either comes back from the dead or force impregnates her. And it's just like, you can't complain about one and then do this shit. The problem is all these people who are the fans that they're trying to bring in are fans who want to destroy everything Star Wars has been. I'm not saying you can't put some more things in that might be more appeasing to these people, but there's always been women who have enjoyed Star Wars.
You
don't really need to change things. People like things for how they are. You don't need to change things to make it broader, because you saw what happened with the Acolyte when they put that in. It destroyed it. And that's just the storytelling, the lore in the story. Acolyte was just garbage and destroyed everything. We went over the breakthrough of how it destroyed continuity and lore and stuff. That's not how you fucking bleed a kyber crystal. I'm not going to get into that fight again, but it's just all these and the people that they're bringing in are not real fans. They're bringing them in so that they can sort of change this lore. How many people want to say in The Mandalorian, there was clearly a sign, and it wasn't a main thing. It was kind of hinted at between Mando and Bo-Katan. It was sort of hinted, he was loyal to her, whether there was romance or not. But people are saying, oh, it was Bo-Katan and the armorer who had a true underlying romance in Ezra. I was like, what? That's not even like. And I'm like, don't bring those people in because they're trying to rewrite it to their fan fiction.
Yeah.
Like, it's not worth it because that's what's pushing out the actual fans. And then they're going to go, I wonder why we're not making any more movies.
That's true.
People fell for Star Wars because it was Star Wars. Because of the Force, because of the story, because of the power dynamics. You have female characters, and every Star Wars show has had main female characters who are powerful, who can do stuff. People loved Cara Dune. She was a badass character. She wasn't even... All these shows, you don't need to make Cara Dune specifically the main character just because she's female and powerful. You created a character, and then she becomes her own lead. Is different because people enjoyed her. And then they fire her.
That's Disney for you.
Headland, another woman who was tapped to write The Acolyte.
I think what's really great is that we're branching out into all these different stories, and Leslie Headland is ushering in this new era of Star Wars.
What's that? This puzzle. Is he or they with us?
I think it's canon that R2-D2 is a lesbian.
I'm sure all of you remember, but Kennedy sought out and greenlit The Acolyte, a Disney Plus show that bombed so badly it was cancelled after one season. And Leslie Headland, the showrunner, had never worked on a sci-fi based project of this scale and proceeded to make the entire series more of a DEI checklist than a cohesive story. I hate everything about this, and it makes me want to crawl in a hole. Now, obviously, there is much more to say about Kathleen Kennedy's eternal stain on Lucasfilm and Star Wars, but I do want to leave you with one final thought that is one of the most egregious to me. Outside of the Disney/Lucasfilm firing Gina Carano thing. How could you be mean to this pretty face? Aside from the bad movies and even worse shows, one of the hallmarks of the Kennedy era of Lucasfilm is the blatant disrespect shown by the brand towards basically everything. Not just the source material, but the audience. As beloved shows and films under the Lucasfilm umbrella were being abused and perverted to suit the whims of activists masquerading as writers, the fans openly spoke out and criticized the new direction. But instead of listening to the fan base, the thing that carried Star Wars for decades, Kennedy's Lucasfilm, from cast members to directors to producers, insulted the audience. They accused everyone of being sexist or racist or bigots. Star Wars isn't failing because of bad writing and terrible, weird political messaging. Star Wars is failing because of those dirty, opinionated internet trolls. That is an interesting business strategy. I wonder why no one's tried that before. The fans...
I feel like I will repeat what we kind of said before Charles arrived. I think the interviews overall and all people working on project, reacting to fans and such, I think a lot of it was an issue. I feel like if we didn't add these interviews, that's just let's have as many buzzwords as possible. I don't think the brand would be that damaged. Any thoughts on that, anyone?
As I was saying, like they hired Leslie, who didn't know the lore. Like they hired someone who doesn't really know Star Wars, who was just hired because she checked the boxes. And as she said, she changed lore for headcanon stuff. Like as I described The Acolyte, it's fan fiction, a fan-made movie made by people who hate the fans, acknowledged by Star Wars. Because it doesn't really fit into canon, and as she even said, R2-D2 is a known lesbian. R2-D2 has been known for years to have
male. Said that in jest. That was a gay magazine that they were interviewing, and those things take 8 hours. She said it in jest. She was kidding.
But in jest, but she knew it would affect the fans. Because not only
and she was right. It shouldn't be that big a deal. It's a joke.
She says that, and they go, "It's the gayest thing in Star Wars." And then they go, "I wonder why people don't like it. They don't like it because," and they're assuming it's gay. Even after they said it's the gayest thing out there, or the gayest Star Wars project, they would then say, "We never said it was about gay." They even went down and said,
They
denies
want
everything.
attention. That works. So I guess we hear about it because of the polls they made and the contradiction they did.
Like when you promote something, you don't go something that's going to insult fans or go against them. You go and say things that will get people interested. And by attacking people's beloved characters, yes, sometimes it's stupid. It's a fictional character. It's a droid. It's not even a human character.
What I'm saying is they're sitting there for 8 hours for those press junkets, and you have a diverse set of interviewees, and like you get tired of hearing the same question over and over again. And perhaps they were enthusiastic because it was like a jovial time, something to joke about.
But it wasn't just for this. They talked about the targets, or not the targets, the check boxes in most of the interviews. They've even said, if you're not a fan of this, then don't watch the show. They even pulled the same thing, and that's when I said, okay, they're preemptively going, no one's going to like this because it's so and so. Just like Charlie's Angels, just like a bunch, Ocean's 13 was it, or 14, that did the girl version, and they said, if you don't like girl things, or if you don't, however they worded it, if you don't like it, don't watch it. If you're a straight white male, don't watch it. And then they complain later going, why didn't straight male not watch us?
Outrage baiting. Outrage baiting is kind of not the best marketing.
No, and they should have known
this is a problem. I'm not saying with just like Disney's been the personification of this over it.
A lot of movies have done it.
They will
I think Charles wants to add something, and we will let Charles add something.
It's something as simple as if you don't like something, why would you watch it? I think the problem with the mass amount of people who have a lot to say on the internet is you're making a big deal over something that you should be ignoring. If they don't make money, if there's no attention on it, they're going to change their path.
But the whole point of the interviews is to market the thing, to make people want to watch it. It's not to scare people off. You want to convince everyone who might not like it because of that messaging to go and watch it. But they scared off so many people before who would have given it a chance. I didn't even give it a chance because of all the bullshit that they promoted. The only reason I watched it was because this French asshole and friend of ours convinced me I couldn't say anything until I watched it. So I sat down and watched the whole fucking thing, and I hated it. It hurt. Like you have to. Like the whole thing about marketing is to bring people in, not to scare people off.
But it's not to scare somebody. It's as simple as if it's not for you, don't watch it. You know that's fine. And
but you're not supposed to say this isn't for you. People who say don't watch this if you're this. That's not.
Did they say if you're white men don't watch it? I don't think they said that.
Me neither. But maybe
straight white male. I don't know if Star Wars said it this time. But they said
maybe it's some misinformation, and that crowd that hates anything Disney mixed up both. I don't know. I guess now while you're searching, except if Charles would like to add more, I think we can play.
No, I think when things are this big a deal as Star Wars is for a lot of people, myself included, you tend to take some of this personal because it's special, but if this were something, I don't know what's coming out this week, whatever. If this were Captain America, whatever the shit the next one is, and they said if you don't like it, don't watch it. I don't know if, as a Star Wars fan, they'd be like, "Oh my God, he's telling me not to watch this." It's kind of inherent.
Even if that was the only thing that was said was if you don't like it, don't watch it. And these were all done before the show. Then there was no viewers because if you don't like this, don't watch it.
And they won't make more of it though. If there's no viewers, they won't, and they stopped. They canceled it.
That's the whole point of the Kathleen Kennedy thing is she produces this stuff and says if you don't like it, don't watch it.
But she also produces Andor. She also produces Skeleton Crew. There are things that what I was trying to say.
You
before,
know how they market those? They don't market this is if you don't like straight white or if you don't like straight males, don't watch it.
Don't think they said if I don't think a representative of Disney Star Wars, Kathleen Kennedy, said if you don't like straight white males, don't watch it. I don't think someone from that side of things said that. But
I'm with you, Charles. I'm pretty sure maybe it's the same crowd that makes a both because they hate Disney.
I think Kathleen Kennedy thinks of Star Wars as this channel on Disney+ where they have different things where, hey, if you like this, there's this show. If you like this, there's that show. It's not just, mainstream Star Wars anymore. They're trying to, I don't know, they're trying to do a lot, but I don't think it's meant to be. If you're a fan of classic Star Wars, fuck you. I think it's, it's great for the people that do like it, and we have something else. If you're not into it, I don't think it's as simple as F the fans.
Yeah,
So
I'm with you.
How do you explain? Now, see, this is something I've always wanted an explanation of, and I've never seen it with Disney. I know Mandalore probably remembers it. I can forgive others who don't. Do you remember back when they were marketing the Kenobi show? They gaslit the main female person.
Yeah, but we already touched upon it, the Lord.
Was that fake outrage? They said, "Oh,
it was there, the Lord," but we already mentioned it, so it's kind of pointless to go back to that.
Were referred to as toxic. When actress Moses Ingram was cast as Reva for the Obi-Wan show on Disney+, there was a preemptive accusation of racism towards the fans, where even Ewan McGregor said that anyone bullying Ingram was no Star Wars fan at all. Fan. Oh my god, I can't speak today.
You're not fam anymore.
Kennedy suggested women struggle in the Star Wars universe because the fan base is male-dominated, suggesting
journalists
it is
and not Disney, by the way.
While I don't doubt that there have been some people who have made truly heinous comments, I mean,
so that's the
is
point.
The internet, after all, I feel like it's really a breeding ground for all that type of thing. I think to then tar the entire viewership and fan base with that same brush is a little bold. Is that the right word for this? Is it bold? Maybe
Who's
stupid?
tying the entire fan base to those communities?
Which honestly checks out. It's kind of like I said before. I'm just not sure how many thoughts happen here when you are the walking embodiment of a lobotomy.
So you were right.
Star Wars is a beloved franchise that people grew up on. Of course, they're going to be passionate about it, and accusing that passion of being something more sinister is naturally going to turn people off. Whenever I look into the Star Wars issues that routinely pop up, I do come across one remark a lot of the time that I think is actually pretty funny. And it's basically that Star Wars fans are never happy. And the reason I bring this up is because it is true that Star Wars fans nitpicked the original films. They hated Hayden Christensen as Anakin. They hated Jar Jar Binks. There's lots of other characters that they just kind of despised, or storylines that they weren't particularly fond of. So I think to assume that the current disdain being angled towards this weird iteration of Lucasfilm is somehow unique to this era is silly, because it's not. Where this differs from normal criticism of a film or a show or a character or whatever is the fact that fans really feel like they have totally lost their franchise. They feel like the very thing that they would...
Are they all fans? Let's be honest. I like it, but I doubt everyone is a fan. A lot of people can pretend to be fan, but I don't see a lot of Mandalore with bunch of helmet and toys. I think you're the kind of fans she might be talking about, but not everyone that talks Star Wars is a big fan.
When Boba Fett was a series and it came out, did the internet like that?
I don't think so. They were like, "Oh, it's mid."
They kind of said it was weird, but it was strange. Like what is the Book of Boba Fett? It didn't impress people like Mandalorian did. But they didn't say it was totally bad. They just said it had weird parts.
What happened? Did I pause, or did you? Was that me or you?
That was me.
What was the last thing you said, or what was the last thing you heard me say? About Boba Fett?
The Book of Boba Fett.
Boba Fett, yeah.
Were people bothered that he was alive?
No.
Yes. People weren't upset with how he was alive. People were upset with the story compared to how it was in Legends, and that it was against his character for how the story played out. I enjoyed it.
I didn't like it. I'm not familiar with any of the novels or anything, but I thought it was. I enjoyed the beginning of Mandalorian, but I didn't need Boba Fett back for whatever the hell they did.
I'm with you. That was just another attempt at getting subscribers to Disney Plus, and it kind of worked, I'm guessing. And I will play now.
drawn to initially is gone, and it's been replaced with something that they don't get and they can't relate to. This new Star Wars, Lucasfilm, whatever, is being directed at an audience that's not even very dedicated to what's being produced. Age-old fans that care about the franchise actually want to see really great storylines and characters brought back again, and, you know, a whole lot less of lesbian space witch covens. So the reality is, even if Kathleen Kennedy ups and leaves tomorrow, her legacy isn't only these shows and films and the corporate feminism that she's forced into the brand. It's the utter chaos that she's unleashed on Lucasfilm and Star Wars. And of course, the disrespect directed towards fans. In the end, I do think that
Is that all
Lucasfilm could
her
probably
doing?
be saved with a giant overhaul.
What? No.
Is that all her doing? Is Kathleen Kennedy responsible for the hate geared towards fans?
A lot of journalists are, but no, it's not her.
I don't think that the proper attention is being paid here.
Yeah, that's a very fair point. And like there's like 1 minute ish missing, but she won't say that much in that last minute. So I guess we can recap what we said. Is she leaving or is she never leaving?
I'll say I think she is going to step down.
She's going to die eventually.
So here's my idea. Like there is a point where you're correct. A lot of the media, you would hope someone like Disney knows if they don't put a lid on media. Let's say someone from like Kotaku or somewhere says something on a game and it completely spotlights or destroys the promotion of a product. About the thing about like the toxic fandom stuff. Either they got that it's an invention of the media, like one of the articles I sent is people who said this was the fandom in 2012, right? And of course that's going to be different. The idea of a guide to toxic fandom around the Moses Ingram when she was doing her thing. I think that's a vocal minority. But here's the thing. Disney did not come out and say this is something we don't acknowledge it. They doubled down and then had Ewan McGregor come out and do the, oh, we don't acknowledge racists in Star Wars. If you're a racist and a bigot, get out. Then they did that.
Why is that negative though?
I don't think Disney squelched the rumors or whatever. Either it's a clickbait.
You didn't really answer.
He's saying, "Don't be a racist, man. That's not what we're about."
Minor hate. They talked to the minority of people who said horrible things. Majority of people weren't. I've never seen, and I deal with some of the most who I argue with. No, and I deal with a lot of big communities that deal with a lot of people who just hate anything Disney and will say the worst things. I never saw anyone calling for her death. I never saw anything. The people who I saw promoting the worst was the actors themselves, saying that this happened. I've never seen what they're saying. The one from,
so then why are you offended? Like that's the point. Like if you're not racist, if you're not part of what they're talking about, why are people offended? Like they're saying race. There's no room for racism in Star Wars, which isn't that. Yeah, like
I think a lot of that.
I don't know why people are taking offense to it if they're not part of the problem.
I think it's part. There was a perception.
Well said.
That was a paid opposition and a made-up opposition to get rage clicks for Obi-Wan.
D-Lord, I think you're chronically online. And,
yes, I would agree with that.
And
paid opposition.
It's not even just we're against racism. They also then go say, if you don't like this show or you don't like this character because she's black, you're racist, when that's not the case. They go and blame white or right-leaning people for why the show got canceled.
Oh, is that Babu Frick over your shoulder? I'm sorry. Is that what's his face from Rise of Skywalker behind your head? Babu Frick behind you? That's fucking awesome. I'm sorry. I'm geeking out here for a second.
That guy is a true Star Wars fan. That's what I'm saying.
Awesome.
Wait.
I envy your background, man.
Holy shit.
Eventually, when my place
blinks and everything. That's awesome.
I will be having a setup like yours, man. But with
Sorry, I
bros.
didn't mean to derail it. I'm
That's
starstruck
fine.
by that thing. It's awesome. Sorry.
That's fine. I like the background as well.
Oh, what? Holy monkey.
I will timestamp that for sure. Do a complete tour, man.
Holy shit. Yeah, do a video.
These are all 1/6 expensive figures. Oh, wait a second. But it's not that. It's just that they end up going, if you don't like I said, Obi-Wan show was actually a really good show. If you took out Reva, that had it didn't add anything to the story. It was completely pointless. But you get labeled by people who, if you don't like this character, you're considered racist. For every time you said you hated the Acolyte, I was a racist, bigot, every ist that you could be, I was called that for not liking it, even though I gave explanations of lore that was broken, canon that was broken, that things weren't done right, that the actress wasn't a good actress. Like, you brought out all these things, and that even minorities were saying the exact same things, you were still called every sort of ist. So it's not just Disney, it's the fans that they're trying to bring in are destroying it from within. And you've got these reporters who on both sides are promoting both wrongs, but when you have reporters going, if you don't like the show, it's your fault because you didn't like the show, and you're probably a racist neo-Nazi. It goes both ways.
But
Disney doesn't go on, and Disney doesn't go out and say, "Well, that's not how we feel."
But
you shouldn't hurt anyone.
And like, so likewise, you could say the same for the fan base. Like, if that's not what defines you, why would you be offended about something that isn't part of your character? Like, oh, that's weird. Somebody would say something so extravagant like that. That kind of sucks that's happening. It's not me, but if people that aren't representative of Disney or Kathleen Kennedy or Star Wars,
But here's the thing: they'll come out and promote and defend one side, going, "You shouldn't hate someone because of their race." And not many people went out, "I hate them because they're this minority or they're female." They'll go and defend that side, but they won't go saying, "Oh, people are allowed to dislike things." People are allowed. They won't go out and defend the other side, going, They don't. They only defend the one side. So it's not that it's not always. They're not necessarily attacking you. They're not defending you. And these are the people who have made them money, who've made them big. Because if it weren't for the fans who like to go by a certain way, by certain standards, or certain history of how things have been.
I get it. I get it. But I think the problem with the internet is there's this shorthand. And when like DEI comes up and these buzzwords, it automatically is something of a turnoff for the people that are creating it, because they think, oh, okay, this is about race, gender, one of those things. Where if you say, hey, this could be, a white boy, a blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy, the character just doesn't work. If you could explain about why the character doesn't work and have nothing to do with
most things, I would agree with you going, it's not just, if they would have switched the character to what they're saying people would have wanted, it still would have been the same crap. I'm not disagreeing with you on that, because I've even said you could have an all-white cast for the Acolyte and it would still be garbage if it was done the exact same. But when they've said, like when the whole Florida thing, like to get someone into politics, when Florida said that they were taking away their sort of special laws because of all their DEI and all these practices that they're doing, and then Disney goes, oh no, we're still going to take that. We're still defending our rights to hire these people this way and to do this. And she even says, we're going to make it more female, which is promoting based on gender, with that not quality. So they are just saying one side, and it is showing that it is DEI. If it was just a movie that didn't talk about how they're hiring or whatnot, they just hired people, you didn't know most of them other than names when things are produced.
I would say
that they go out and publicly stand by how they're doing things, saying, oh no, we're going to continue to do it this way, and they stand by DEI, and they are the people who, when it's called out DEI, going, there's nothing wrong with DEI, you're just racist. No, DEI is actually specifically sexist, racist.
I think it comes in the end. It's entertainment, and it's about quality. If you just say, it doesn't matter who you put in this. It's not good work. I'm not with it.
And I agree with that. But when you come out and they defend particular way,
Yep.
and then they blame you for not liking it, and they defend one side and not the other, going, well, it would have been more written, and the character was sort of rewritten into canon as is. Like Finn is actually a rewritten character. Finn was actually based in Legends. Finn was a white guy, and I'm not saying him as a black guy, but he was also, and he had the Force ability. But they changed it, and they keep doing this, and they defend that, but they never do it the other way. And this is Disney as a whole. Riri Williams has always been a black character. She was kind of a pushed in sort of character. I've never really read any of her stuff because I never found it interesting. There were talks when Endgame came out that his daughter would become the new Ironheart. You saw her put the helmet on, and it would make sense to make his daughter the next Iron Man. Would it not? Well, the actress who played the daughter was getting death threats by people because they were taking away a black character. You never see it go the other way. You never see a black character get rewritten into a white person, and it's defended. And I'm not saying that, I'm not trying to bring in just a topic of race swap characters, but it's always defended one way. It's never gone the other way.
Yeah.
And when you build it up as a whole, because most Star Wars fans aren't just Star Wars fans, they're Marvel fans, they're all these, and you see, and a lot of properties under Disney, and you see this done to all your characters. It's a thing as a whole. And Kathleen Kennedy is very much pro this way. It's a Disney thing, and it is there. And some of it is just feelings and political biases going, I want it this way. Some of it, there are the very few who are just racist. But that's with anything. There's black racists who hate white characters.
Yeah.
But they only defend it one way. And it's not just a simple, because it's a black character and people are racist, and that Disney doesn't go out. It's that they only do things one way. And if you look at it as a broad picture, and it's a bigger picture. And yes, people like me and D-Lord who are online more see it more. But we see it. People don't always see it because they're just go by, they're not seeing as much. They don't see every little thing. They don't sort of go, oh, wait a second. They did it to this character, they did it to this, they did it to this, they did it to this. They just see the three and they're done.
Yeah.
But when you do it as a whole.
And I gotta say, to close off that recap, something that was very interesting. If Kathleen Kennedy is still there, it's because one of her movies made lots of money, and even the other ones, even if they were poorly received in general, they made money. And when you make money, people shut up and they tell you keep doing money. I think that's a good way to close off the recap.
She's
So
the
I will
third
ask.
highest grossing producer in history.
That's successful, man. And thank you for bringing this up. I didn't think of it until you mentioned it, and that was a great addition there. So I will ask D-Lord, what do you have going on your end of the internet?
I'll see this month. I may have that thing. I plan to do something on there. I've been trying to bug Mandalore on the whole Kathleen Kennedy leaving us, and the more the buzz about it and what the effects would have been weeks ago, but they flew by. I do have commentary stuff on my streams that I need to fix. So, and I still do gaming streams. So,
thank you a lot for sharing. What about you, Charles? What do you have going on? If you're still here, if he's not here, I will pass on the mic to Mandalore.
Just my normal raising hell online and starting shit and some stuff with D-Lord. We've been talking about doing a similar stream, but more in depth on lore of Star Wars and Kathleen Kennedy than this was. But other than that, not much.
That sounds fun. And maybe on my side, maybe I will be reacting, or I should say we might be reacting to things next Saturday if people are on, if I get the time. Outside of that, tomorrow we talk with Dre and the others about Babes. I think it was Babes that we chose. So yeah.
No more children.
No more children. Yeah, enough of that PTSD there. So I guess Charles, anything to close this off, or maybe you're still away because I see the mic. is muted. So yeah, that's it for tonight, I guess. And thank you everyone for just coming in, and I think that was a very fun talk, and we are out.